All right, let's dive right in. We're going to talk about something so fundamental we almost never question it, that constant feeling of being you. But what if I told you that feeling, as real as it seems, is actually one of the most brilliant illusions our mind has ever created? So let me ask you straight up. Who are you, really? It sounds like a simple question, doesn't it? But as we're about to find out, the moment you actually try to pin down that you, things start to get, well, really weird. You know the feeling. Of course, I'm the same person who graduated college or who went to that concert 10 years ago. This sense of a solid, continuous self is like an anchor for our entire life story. It's what connects our past regrets to our future hopes. But is that anchor actually tied to anything solid? So, if this feeling is so strong, where does the doubt even come from? Well, our investigation starts where this whole question began, in the minds of philosophers, who for centuries have been on a search for this mysterious I. Here's the basic conflict. On the left is what we all feel in our gut. There's a solid, unchanging me at my core. But on the right is the shocking conclusion from thinkers like David Hume. He argued that the self isn't a thing at all. It's more like a river, a constant, flowing bundle of thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. Hume did a simple experiment. He just looked inward. He tried to find the person watching the movie in the theater of his mind. But no matter how hard he looked, he could never find the audience member. All he could ever see was the movie itself, just a stream of perceptions, feelings, and ideas passing by. There was no one home. And this isn't just some quirky Western idea. It's an ancient concept in Eastern traditions too. Take the Buddhist idea of anatta, or no self. It teaches that what we call a person is just a temporary mashup of 5 changing parts, like our body, our feelings, and so on. The classic analogy is the chariot. You've got wheels, an axle, a frame, but there's no single chariot thing apart from the pieces. The word chariot is just a useful label we put on the collection. Okay, so the philosophers came up empty-handed. But what happens when we move from thought experiments into the science lab? Can modern neuroscience find this ghost in the machine? Let's take a look. What science has found is pretty mind-blowing, and it lines up perfectly with the philosophers. Neuroscientists have looked everywhere, and guess what? There's no single spot in the brain you can point to and say, aha, there's the self. Instead, that feeling of being you is generated by a massive team effort across countless different brain networks. And we know how fragile it is. We've all heard stories about brain injuries that completely change someone's personality. If the self was a solid core, how could that happen? Now, this is where it gets really wild. In patients who've had the connection between their 2 brain hemispheres severed, scientists have shown that there can be 2 separate streams of consciousness living in one head, sometimes even want different things. If the self was one single thing, this would be completely impossible. Okay, I get it. At this point, you're probably thinking, hold on, this is all fascinating, but I feel like me. It feels real. And that's the most important objection, isn't it? If the self is just an illusion, how does it explain, well, everything? Let's tackle these head on. What about holding people responsible for their actions? Well, that's a social contract, a super useful tool we've all agreed on to make society work. Okay, but if there's no self, who's doing the thinking? The thoughts just happen. Think of it like a flame being passed from one candle to the next. The process continues without needing a permanent flame holder. And that powerful, undeniable feeling of me? That's the brain's masterpiece. It's running an incredibly convincing simulation that's so seamless, we don't even realize it's a simulation. So if the self isn't a real thing we just find, then what on earth is it? We finally reached the verdict. The self isn't a thing at all. It's a story. And your brain is the greatest storyteller you'll ever meet. Scientists have this fantastic term for it, narrative gravity. It's the idea that our brains are basically storytelling machines. They can't help it. They take all the chaotic, messy, random experiences of life and constantly spin them into a coherent story, an autobiography. And who's the main character of that story? You are. It pretty much happens in 3 steps. First, your brain is flooded with raw data, sights, sounds, feelings, thoughts. Second, your memory, which is way more of a creative writer than a video camera, reconstructs all that data into a story with a beginning, middle, and end. And third, the hero of that story emerges, that feeling of a stable, continuous I. So think about this. The consistency we feel in our lives isn't the consistency of an unchanging character. It's the consistency of the story being told. We mistake the plot for the protagonist. All right, so what's the point of all this? Why does any of this matter? This isn't just some weird philosophical trivia. Believing this can actually lead to a pretty profound sense of freedom. You see, when we're clinging to the idea of a fixed, solid self, it can be like a prison. We get trapped by stories we tell ourselves like, I'm just an anxious person, or I'm a failure. We feel this pressure to stay consistent with who we were yesterday. But when we see the self as a fluid, ongoing process, wow, that's freedom. It gives us permission to actually grow and change. It helps us have more compassion for other people who are also just changing stories. And it frees us from the weight of our own past. This quote really says it all. You are not some static thing that life is happening to. You are the experience. You are the river of thoughts, feelings, and sensations itself, just taking the shape of you for a little while. So realizing that the self is a story doesn't mean you disappear. It means you've just been handed the pen. It gives you the power to become the conscious author of your own story. So the only question left is, what will you write next?